I knew the weather was going to change, but I didn't think it was going to be quite this extreme. So definitely a day for the workshop. So in preparation of leveling this lawn, today I'm going to show you how to make a lawn leveling lute. Try saying that after a few drinks. So yes, forced inside due to the weather. Spring in the UK with snow on the ground. Isn't that typical? So today I thought I'd take the opportunity to make a lawn levelling rake or lawn levelling lute. I've seen it used on lots and lots of YouTube channels, and because I'm coming up to levelling my lawn in the next couple of weeks, weather permitting, I do need one of these. So I've been looking on the internet to buy one, and I can't believe how expensive they are. So time to make your own. So what I've got here is I've got some 30 by 30 steel angle with a thickness of about 3.5 millimeters. I've gone for steel rather than aluminium because I don't really want to end up with a lightweight aluminium frame that just rides over mounds of soil. I think the head does need some weight to it, so when you're pushing and pulling it back, it can cut into soil or sand and actually do its job and level it out as well. Size wise, I'm going to go for around about 900 wide or 3 foot wide by about maybe 12 or 14 inches deep. Those are the sort of sizes I've seen being sold, and I think that's the sort of size that will suit my garden as well. Now when it comes to joining all this together, I'm not a welder and I have no welding equipment at all. So I'm going to be joining it all together with bolts and tapping some threads as well. So it's a sort of job that any DIY can do in their garden or in their garage without specialised welding equipment. But I think the first thing I need to do is cut it to the right length, and then I can start thinking about joining it together. This steel angle is a very common size, and I bought mine at a local DIY store. From one 2.5 metre length, I realise I can get two 900mm lengths and two 350mm lengths exactly. So that's the size that I finally settle for. I make sure the piece is well clamped to the bench before I start the cut. I realise halfway through my first cut that the sparks coming from the cutting disc are going over all kinds of stored items that may be flammable, so I use a board to protect them and put my fire extinguisher close to hand just in case. With the main elements cut, I lay them out to see how they look. My design requires the long sections to sit on top of the side pieces, so the bottom of the lute is not actually perfectly flat. The middle pieces are 3.5mm higher than the sides. However, I've decided that if I can get my bumpy lawn to within 3.5mm, I will still be more than happy. Well, that's starting to look a little bit more like it. I've cut two small sections here that will go into this centre section so I can actually bolt the joint on that is at the other end of the handle, and I've got a little trick that I'll show you about this. Now, if you are a welder and you've got your own welding kit, it's incredibly easy at this point to go around and just weld everything up, and that's about a 10-minute job and you will be absolutely finished. As I said earlier, I'm not a welder, I haven't got any welding kit. So the way I'm going to actually be joining these together, if I just show you an example here. I'm simply going to be joining these two with just some bolts that I've got in my workshop. These are M6 bolts. So to join two like this, I'll drill a hole big enough in this one that the thread can go through, and then in the lower one I'll drill a hole and then tap it out so this bolt can actually bite into this lower piece. So on each section I'll end up with a bolt that looks a little bit like this, and then I'll just trim the bolt off. Because obviously I can't have anything protruding out the bottom of this that's going to snag on the grass or the topsoil at all. So any of these bolts that come out the bottom, once they're tightened up, I'll just zip them off so they're flush with the bottom as well. So I'm going to have to drill lots of holes. I've got a nice new Bosch pack of drill bits here, and these are the Point TQ drill bits. If you saw my video on how to drill steel with just using a hand drill, this is the type I was using. I've actually gone and got a set of all the different sizes, and I've used these once or twice already, and they go through metal like nobody's business. So time to get drilling. The secret to successful drilling through steel without blunting drill bits is to go slow and exert a fair bit of pressure. If you want to see this in more detail, please go and have a look at my How to Drill Through Steel Beams with a Cordless Drill video, where I explain this in a lot more detail. One, 2, 5, 1, 2, 5. So I've rearranged it again. Now I've cut those top holes, which are like the through holes that the bolt isn't going to bite into, because now I need to mark the bottom holes are the ones I'm going to put a thread in where the bolts are going to actually bite into. And I've just arranged it on the corner of my workbench, which I know is an absolute true 90 degree, because I made sure that the workbench was like that when I made it. And measuring it, is it absolutely perfect? It isn't. It's a few millimeters out one way or the other. And that will be due to me on the angle grinder just cutting not absolutely perfect. But it doesn't matter, no one's going to notice, and for it to be slightly out of square or slightly trapezoidal rather than a rectangle really doesn't matter. And this is the great thing about projects like this, is that only you really understand how accurate you are. And if it doesn't matter, I wouldn't spend too much time trying to fix it. Clamping all of this together before marking is a good idea. I didn't here, but I was careful not to move any of the lengths while I was marking through the holes. This second set of holes are 5mm in diameter, which I need to allow the tap to cut the last millimetre to accept the M6 bolts that I'm using. This tapping tool is the cheapest, most basic one on the market, but still works well for me on the odd occasions that I need to use it. Once I have the tap in a turn, I add some oil, which should help the cut. As I'm screwing this in, after each half turn, I go back a quarter just to clear the newly cut thread. Very quickly the thread through this relatively thin steel is cut. I check to make sure the bolt fits the first thread properly before I cut the rest. Within a few minutes, all the threads are cut and I can put it together. So that's the first test fit, and everything fit, which is quite nice and not what I was expecting. If anything doesn't fit at this stage, it's fairly easy to rectify. All you need to do is make the upper holes, the hole that the bolt just slides in and out, just elongated or a little bit bigger, just to give you a bit more wiggle room, and very soon you'll get everything to fit. But that was first time, which is slightly unusual. I'm also happy that the bolt is actually catching quite nicely on the thread that I put on the bottom plate there. It's only 3.5 millimeters, but it looks like I can really tighten it up without it just sort of tearing out the thread, which is good. So what I'm going to do now is, I proved to myself it fits together. I'm going to undo it all, and the one thing I haven't done is, although I've cut all the steel, I haven't rounded all the edges and done any grinding at all. So it's now time to grind off any rough edges. And I think it's just worth mentioning that if you're using an angle grinder or a disc cutter, there's two different blades you can use for cutting and grinding, or should I say, there's two different blades that you have to use. So if you just have a look at this, this is a cutting disc and this is a grinding disc, and you'll see that the cutting disc is an awful lot thinner than the grinding disc, which is good when you're cutting steel because it means that you're taking out less material. It's easier on the disc cutter or angle grinder, and it's easier on the blade as well. But if you're going to start using this as a grinding disc and start using the side here, very quickly this thin disc is going to get so thin it's going to shatter and end up shooting out from your disc cutter or angle grinder very, very quickly in all directions. So for grinding we use these thicker discs, which means that they're designed to be used on the side here. They've also got a bulbous section, which means that the locking nut is recessed, so it's not going to get in the way when you're grinding. So it's really important, if you've got an angle grinder, that you know which discs to use when and how to fit them properly. If you were on site and working in construction, you'd have to do a course on abrasive wheels before you even touched any of these. So it's good as a homeowner to actually understand what you're doing. These are all very well until they go wrong. And when they do go wrong, they tend to go wrong very quickly. It's also worth mentioning that eye protection when you're using an angle grinder, just wearing safety glasses is not enough. You really need a full face visor. Something like this is rated higher than safety glasses, and it also covers down here from the chin up. There's always that chance with safety glasses you'll get one of those shards of metal go underneath and into your eye. So I'd highly recommend investing a few pound on a visor like this if you're going to be using an angle grinder or a disc cutter. So back to the project. Anyway, so I'm going to take this apart now. I'm then going to grind down all the sharp edges with this grinding disc just to finish them off. And then it's time that I can put all these bolts back with some washers and tighten them up. And then hopefully we can get on and fix the handle. For the proper assembly, I add in some washers and use my impact driver just to speed up the winding in the bolts, but without going too far. I add some thread lock at this stage that should end up in the threaded section once I screw the bolts in fully. This is just to help make sure the bolts don't come loose over time. But with little mechanical vibration, this isn't very likely, but as I have it to hand on my shelf, I decide to use it anyway. Even though the threaded section is only 3.5 millimeters thick, I still get good strong fixings with the bolts without any shearing the thread. So that's the bottom of the Lute complete. All the edges, all the sharp edges are ground down. the thread lock's on, everything's tightened up, and I don't intend to touch that again. Which leaves just one pretty major item, which is the hinge. Now, something like this is now starting to get a little bit heavy. So I was thinking about different ways of putting on a hinge and the bolt and the bits of metal and what have you. It's all a little bit lightweight and wibbly wobbly. So I came up with the idea of using something that's already prefabricated. And I've gone for a gate hinge. This is the sort of hinge that you put on your gate and you just slip over this and it opens the gate. But if we rotate it this way, that means that I can use it on the handle up and down, but also it's got no give left and right as well. And it's fairly chunky and it's fairly thick steel as well. So it's easy to modify this to put it onto here. And I'm just going to make a couple of brackets and then just bolt it on. So I've just bolted the hinge to a couple of brackets and just attached a Jubilee clip on the end here to stop this hinge falling off. It doesn't need very much, it just stops it rattling about really. Now, when I was looking at where to mount this, first of all, in this direction, I realised that the hinge wasn't actually central. So I've had to move the whole arrangement slightly to the right to get the hinge in the middle. You can see it's slightly out of whack there. And also, front to back, really, when I pick this lute up, I want the front to drop forwards, so at least I can put it on the floor. If I'm too far forwards, what it will do is it suddenly will go vertical, and I don't really want that to happen. So I've moved it to the rear a little bit. So all I now have to do is bolt this in, put a bit of thread lock, clean this up, and we should be ready to give it a test. So let's give this a try, shall we? The handle that I'm using here is off of an old garden tool, but you can use a broom handle instead. The longer the better, as the lute really needs to be well in front of you when you're working with it. This handle already has 2 holes in it, so I fix one to the hole in the hinge and then drill another for it to fit. And with the lute complete, all the materials I've used here came to well under £50. So I think that I call a success. I'm glad I used the really heavyweight gate hinge for the main hinge between the handle and the base. When I was pushing it backwards and forwards just now, you can really tell that there's a lot of force on that hinge section, especially when you try to move it left and right. And I think if you made it out of anything lighter than that, let's say aluminium, sheet aluminium, it wouldn't be long before the thing just starts bending and just fails completely. So I'm glad I've made it out of something quite heavyweight. I'm interested to see how it works in real life when I use it in anger, trying to level the lawn. I've never used one of these before. So I think I'll probably find out in a couple of weeks' time when I do that and do the overseeding as well. But it's turned out as I'd hoped. So I'm glad that I'm now a proud owner of a lawn leveling lute. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please check out the other ones on the channel, and please go and have a look at our Patreon page, and maybe you can support us over there. So until next time, I never thought I'd own a lute.